The Galactic Council chamber hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 species gathered in emergency session. Ambassador Veltar of the Zelani Collective adjusted his breathing apparatus, the crystalline formations on his head pulsing with anxiety. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed a single, unremarkable blue-green world spinning slowly in space. "This cannot be accurate," declared High Counselor Zenthara, her 6 arms gesturing dismissively at the display. No sentient species could possibly evolve on such a hostile environment. The human delegation sat quietly in their designated section, wearing simple environmental suits that seemed primitive compared to the elaborate life support systems of other species. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's lead xenobiologist, watched the debate with growing amusement. Beside her, Admiral Marcus Steele maintained his poker face, though his fingers drummed silently on his armrest. Chief Science Officer Morden of the Hegemony stepped forward, his massive insectoid frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. "The data is irrefutable. This world they call Earth possesses gravity nearly twice that of standard habitable planets. The atmospheric composition contains 21% oxygen, a level that would cause severe toxicity in most species. Surface temperatures range from -50 to +60 degrees on their measurement scale." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. Several delegates checked their translation devices, certain they had misheard. "Furthermore," Morden continued, his mandibles clicking nervously, "the planet experiences regular bombardment from cosmic radiation due to a thin atmospheric layer. Massive storms regularly devastate entire continents. Seismic activity threatens surface dwellers constantly. The magnetic field fluctuates unpredictably. And perhaps most disturbing of all, the surface is 70% covered in a liquid that would dissolve the exoskeletons of half the species in this chamber." Ambassador Veltar's breathing grew more labored. "Surely you jest. No complex life could survive such conditions, let alone develop intelligence and technology." Dr. Chen finally stood, her movement fluid and confident despite the heavy gravity generators keeping her comfortable in the chamber. "Honorable delegates, perhaps I can clarify some misconceptions about our world." The chamber fell silent. Most species had never heard a human speak at length, considering them too primitive for meaningful dialogue. "Earth is indeed a challenging environment," Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "But you're viewing it through the lens of your own evolutionary advantages. Where you see deadly radiation, we see energy that helped drive the mutations necessary for complex life. Where you see dangerous storms, we see weather patterns that distribute resources and regulate temperature across our continents." She gestured to the holographic Earth. "That liquid you find so threatening? Water. It's the foundation of all life on our planet. Our bodies are roughly 60% water. We drink it, swim in it, and our children play in it for entertainment." Several delegates physically recoiled. The methane breathers required emergency assistance as their atmospheric processors struggled to cope with their shock. "Admiral." Steele rose beside Chen. "The Galactic Council invited Earth to join this assembly after our first contact. Protocols were established 6 months ago. We accepted gladly, hoping to learn from species with thousands of years of spacefaring experience. However, it seems there may be some fundamental misunderstandings about human capabilities." High Counselor Zenthara regained her composure. "We mean no offense, Admiral Steele, but surely you must understand our concern. Your species evolved on what can only be classified as a Class 12 death world. The implications are staggering." "What implications?" Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Morden stepped forward again. "The classification system exists for good reason. Species that evolve on death worlds develop certain characteristics: enhanced physical capabilities, accelerated healing, resistance to environmental hazards, improved tactical thinking under stress. Most concerning of all, they tend toward aggressive solutions when faced with threats." The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. Several species activated privacy shields to confer with their home governments. "Are you suggesting," Admiral Steele said slowly, "that humanity poses some kind of threat to galactic peace?" "We're suggesting," Zenthara replied carefully, "that perhaps Earth's admission to the Council was premature. Until we can properly assess the potential risks." Dr. Chen laughed, the sound carrying an edge that made several nearby delegates uncomfortable. "Risks? Honorable counselors, we've been part of this assembly for 6 months. In that time, have we threatened anyone? Have we made territorial demands? Have we shown any aggression whatsoever? Your military vessels concern us, admitted Ambassador Veltar. They lack the elegant efficiency of proper starship design. Instead, they appear built for durability and conflict. Admiral Steele nodded slowly. Our ships are indeed built to withstand harsh conditions. When you're exploring space from a death world, you prepare for the worst. Our vessels need to handle solar flares, asteroid impacts, and radiation storms that would cripple ships designed for peaceful exploration in safe sectors. You see? Morden's mandibles clicked rapidly. This proves our point. Even their peaceful exploration vessels are essentially warships. The human delegation exchanged glances. Chen could see that Steele was beginning to lose his diplomatic patience. Perhaps, Chen said diplomatically, we could arrange for some cultural exchange programs. Allow your scientists to visit Earth under proper protection, of course. See for yourselves how we live. The suggestion sent waves of horror through the assembly. Visit a death world voluntarily? Several delegates began calculating the odds of survival. High Counselor Zenthera called for order. While we appreciate the generous offer, Dr. Chen, I think it would be more prudent to conduct our observations remotely. For everyone's safety. Admiral Steele finally spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. With respect, counselors, it sounds like you've already made up your minds about humanity. You're discussing us as if we're some kind of galactic threat, rather than the peaceful explorers we've proven ourselves to be. The concern is not about your current intentions, Zenthera explained. It's about your potential. Deathworld species have historically been unpredictable. When threatened or cornered, they can become extraordinarily dangerous. More dangerous than the hegemony's battle fleets? Chen asked pointedly. More dangerous than the collective's planet killers? More dangerous than any of the weapon systems I've seen in this assembly? The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quiet carried a different quality. Several species began reviewing their own military capabilities, suddenly conscious of how their weapons might appear to others. Morden broke the silence. The difference, Dr. Chen, is that our weapons were developed for defense and deterrence. Your entire species was forged by conflict, shaped by struggle, hardened by adversity. You are weapons. Admiral Steele stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with quiet intensity. Perhaps you're right, Chief Science Officer. Perhaps we are weapons. But here's what you should consider. We're weapons that chose to seek peace. We're weapons that decided to explore instead of conquer. We're weapons that extended friendship instead of domination. He paused, letting his words sink in. The question you need to ask yourselves isn't whether we're dangerous. The question is, what kind of galaxy do you want to create? One where beings are judged by their potential for violence, or one where they're valued for their choice to pursue something better? The chamber remained silent as the implications of his words settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. 3 weeks after the emergency session, tensions throughout the galaxy had reached a breaking point. The hegemony's military fleets had quietly repositioned themselves along human trade routes, while the Zilani Collective had begun restricting access to their advanced medical facilities for human crews. Other species watched nervously as the two major powers maneuvered around Earth's small but growing presence in galactic affairs. Captain Lisa Rodriguez piloted her cargo vessel through the Kepler Junction, one of the galaxy's busiest trade hubs. Her ship, the Endurance, carried medical supplies destined for the colony worlds in the Outer Rim, a routine mission that had become increasingly dangerous as anti-human sentiment spread. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Junction Control, announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Park. They're ordering us to submit to inspection. Rodriguez frowned. The Kepler Junction had always been neutral territory, governed by ancient treaties that guaranteed safe passage for all registered vessels. Put them through. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features of a hegemony officer. His compound eyes reflected the bridge lights as he spoke. Human vessel, you will reduce speed and prepare for boarding. This inspection is for the safety of all traffic in this system. Under what authority? Rodriguez demanded. We're carrying emergency medical supplies under council protection. Our cargo manifest was pre-approved. New security protocols have been implemented, the officer replied coldly. All Deathworld vessels require enhanced screening. Reduce speed immediately or we will consider you hostile. Rodriguez looked at her crew. The bridge of the Endurance held 5 humans, all volunteers who had signed up for deep space service knowing the risks. They had weathered cosmic storms that would have destroyed most civilian vessels, navigated through asteroid fields that other species considered impassable, and maintained their ship through radiation zones that required constant repair work. "Captain," whispered her tactical officer, "their cruiser has weapons locked on us." Rodriguez nodded slowly. She had served in Earth's defense forces before joining the Merchant Marine, and she recognized the tactical situation immediately. The hegemony vessel outgunned them significantly, but it was also designed for battles in safe space, with elegant weapon systems that prioritized efficiency over durability. "Lieutenant Park, open a channel to the junction authorities," she ordered. "I want this conversation recorded." As the channel opened, Rodriguez addressed both the hegemony officer and the junction control simultaneously. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Endurance. We are being unlawfully detained while carrying medical supplies to plague-stricken colonies. I'm formally protesting this violation of free passage treaties." The junction control operator, a nervous Altarian, stammered his response. "Captain, we have to comply with hegemony security requirements. They've designated this area as under special jurisdiction." "Since when does the hegemony have jurisdiction over neutral space?" Rodriguez shot back. The hegemony officer's patience was clearly wearing thin. "You will comply with inspection protocols or face the consequences. We know what Death World species are capable of when threatened." Rodriguez felt her crew tense around her. This was the moment she had trained for, though she had hoped never to face it. The decision she made now would echo throughout human space and possibly determine how her species was treated for generations to come. "Mr. Chen," she called to her engineer, "what's our engine status?" "Running hot but stable, Captain. We can maintain full power for extended periods." "Good. Lieutenant Park, record this message for transmission to Earth Command and the Galactic Council." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "This is Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the merchant vessel Endurance. We are currently being threatened by hegemony forces while conducting a legitimate medical supply run. I want it on record that we have made no aggressive moves and have complied with all established protocols." She turned back to the hegemony officer. "Commander, you've made a serious mistake. You're treating us as hostile when we've done nothing but try to help sick people. But if you want to see what a Death World species is really capable of, I'm happy to show you." "You dare threaten a hegemony battlecruiser?" the officer snarled. Rodriguez smiled, and several of her crew members noticed that it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just pointing out that you might want to reconsider your approach." Without warning, Rodriguez engaged the Endurance's engines at full power. The cargo vessel shot forward, accelerating at a rate that would have injured most galactic species. The human crew, conditioned by life on a high-gravity world, barely noticed the increased pressure. The hegemony cruiser, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, struggled to adjust its targeting systems. Their elegant weapon arrays, designed for precise long-range engagements, had difficulty tracking a target moving erratically at close range. "Captain, they're firing warning shots," reported the tactical officer. "Let them," Rodriguez replied calmly. "Their weapons are designed for space battles against other military vessels. They're not going to risk destroying a medical supply ship and facing council sanctions." She was gambling, but it was an educated gamble. The hegemony prided itself on following galactic law, even when they bent it to their purposes. Destroying a civilian vessel carrying medical supplies would be impossible to justify. The Endurance weaved through the junction's traffic patterns, using the civilian vessels as cover. Rodriguez's piloting skills, honed by years of navigating Earth's chaotic orbital space, allowed her to thread between ships in ways that made the hegemony commander increasingly nervous. "Human vessel, cease this reckless behavior immediately," the officer shouted over the comm. "You're endangering civilian traffic." "Funny," Rodriguez replied. "I thought you were the one who brought weapons into a civilian area." Other ships in the junction were beginning to take notice. Several captains opened communication channels to demand explanations, while others simply moved away from the confrontation as quickly as possible. The Altarian junction controller was becoming increasingly agitated. "All vessels, please maintain safe distances. We are attempting to resolve this situation peacefully." Rodriguez saw her opportunity. Junction Control, we request immediate safe passage to continue our medical mission. We are willing to transmit our complete cargo manifest and destination coordinates to prove our humanitarian purpose. Before the controller could respond, another voice cut through the comm channels. This is Admiral Kextar of the Zilani Collective Battle Group. All vessels will stand down immediately. On the long-range sensors, 3 massive collective dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Their arrival changed the tactical situation dramatically. The hegemony officer found himself caught between protecting his authority and avoiding a major interstellar incident. Admiral Kextar, this is a hegemony security operation. The Collective has no jurisdiction here. The Collective has jurisdiction wherever our citizens are threatened, Kextar replied smoothly. And we consider the intimidation of medical supply vessels to be a threat to all spacefaring peoples. Rodriguez realized she was watching galactic politics in action. The Collective and the hegemony had been rivals for centuries, and her situation had provided them with an excuse to flex their military muscles. Captain Rodriguez, Admiral Kextar continued, you are free to continue your mission under collective protection. We will escort you to the edge of our territorial space. The offer was tempting, but Rodriguez understood the implications. Accepting collective protection would align humanity with one side in an ancient rivalry, potentially making enemies of the hegemony permanently. Thank you for the generous offer, Admiral, she replied carefully, but we prefer to handle this situation through proper diplomatic channels. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed her response. She was refusing protection from the most powerful fleet in the system, choosing instead to trust in galactic law and human resourcefulness. Very well, Kextar acknowledged. We will remain in the area to ensure all parties comply with junction neutrality treaties. The hegemony commander found himself outmaneuvered. With collective forces watching, he couldn't risk aggressive action without justification. More importantly, Rodriguez's refusal of collective protection had demonstrated that humans weren't automatically aligning with any particular power block. Junction Control, Rodriguez announced. We're resuming course to our approved destination. Our cargo manifest is already on file, and we're operating under valid Council medical emergency protocols. The Altarian controller, clearly relieved to have a way out of the situation, quickly agreed. Cleared for departure, Endurance. Safe travels. As her ship moved away from the junction, Rodriguez reflected on what had just happened. The incident would be reported throughout the galaxy within hours. Some would see it as proof that humans were dangerously unpredictable. Others might recognize it as evidence that Deathworld species could show restraint even when threatened. What mattered most was that they had demonstrated something crucial. Humans wouldn't be intimidated, but they also wouldn't be goaded into unnecessary conflicts. News of the Kepler Junction incident spread through the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. Within 48 hours, every major government had received detailed reports, and public opinion was fracturing along species lines. The footage of a single human cargo vessel, outmaneuvering a hegemony battlecruiser while carrying medical supplies became one of the most watched recordings in galactic history. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her laboratory aboard the research station Horizon's Edge, analyzing xenobiological samples from newly discovered worlds. As Earth's leading expert on extremophile organisms, she had been stationed at the remote facility to study life forms that thrived in the galaxy's most hostile environments. The work was solitary but important, contributing to humanity's growing understanding of how life adapted to impossible conditions. The station's communication array crackled to life, interrupting her concentration. Dr. Vasquez, this is Commander Thorne. We're receiving an emergency distress signal from the Vegan system. Multiple ships are requesting immediate biological assistance. Vasquez looked up from her microscope, concerned. The Vegan system was home to over 3 billion Altarians, a peaceful species known for their advanced agricultural techniques. What's the nature of the emergency? Unknown pathogens spreading rapidly through their population. Their medical facilities are overwhelmed, and they're specifically requesting human expertise with extreme biological threats. The request made sense from a scientific perspective. Humans, having evolved on a world teeming with dangerous microorganisms, had developed sophisticated immune systems and medical protocols for dealing with biological hazards. What most species consider deadly plagues, humans often treated as minor illnesses. Prep the fast courier, Vasquez ordered. I'll need my full biosafety kit and samples of our broad-spectrum immune boosters. As she gathered her equipment, Vasquez couldn't help but wonder if this emergency was somehow connected to the growing tensions around humanity's presence in galactic society. The timing seemed suspiciously convenient. The journey to the Vegan system took 18 hours at maximum burn. During the flight, Vasquez reviewed everything known about Altarian biology. They were silicon-based life forms with crystalline internal structures, completely different from Earth's carbon-based organisms. Any pathogen that could affect them would have to be something entirely new. Upon arrival, the scope of the crisis became immediately apparent. The system's orbital stations were running on skeleton crews, and several agricultural worlds showed signs of massive population displacement. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels with desperate pleas for assistance. "Human vessel, this is Vegan Control," came a weak transmission. "Dr. Vasquez, we are grateful for your response. Please dock at Medical Station 7. Our chief physician is waiting." Medical Station 7 was in chaos. Altarian medical staff moved frantically between treatment centers, their usually graceful movements made jerky by exhaustion and fear. The patients lay in specialized crystalline chambers, their normally bright internal light patterns dim and flickering. Dr. Silthara, the station's chief physician, met Vasquez at the airlock. The Altarian's translucent form showed stress fractures along her arm structures, a sign of extreme fatigue. "Dr. Vasquez, thank you for coming. We are facing something unprecedented. The pathogen attacks our cellular matrices directly, causing cascade failures throughout our biological systems. Our best scientists cannot even identify what it is, let alone how to stop it." Vasquez followed Silthara through the medical facility, her trained eye taking in the symptoms. The affected Altarian showed a progressive deterioration that resembled nothing in her experience with silicon-based life forms. "Have you been able to isolate the pathogen?" she asked. "That is the problem," Silthara replied. "We cannot find any foreign organism. It is as if our own cellular processes are simply failing." In the laboratory, Vasquez examined tissue samples under high-powered scanners. What she found was disturbing. The Altarian cells were indeed breaking down, but not from any external infection. Instead, their cellular repair mechanisms were shutting down systematically. "This isn't a disease," she murmured, studying the data. "It's more like accelerated aging." "Aging?" Silthara looked confused. "But it affects individuals of all ages equally." Vasquez continued her analysis, comparing the failing cells with healthy samples. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The affected cells showed signs of radiation damage, but not from any natural source. "Dr. Silthara, has there been any unusual space traffic in your system recently? Any new mining operations or industrial facilities?" "No, nothing like that, although—" She paused, her internal light patterns shifting to a worried blue. "There was a hegemony research vessel that visited our outer system about 2 weeks ago. They claimed to be conducting routine stellar observations." Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. 2 weeks was exactly the incubation period she was seeing in the cellular damage patterns. "I need to see the sensor logs from that visit," she said urgently. The data told a disturbing story. The hegemony vessel had indeed conducted observations, but their scans had focused on the inhabited worlds rather than stellar phenomena. More troubling, the sensor readings showed traces of artificial radiation signatures in the system's solar wind. "This is biological warfare," Vasquez concluded grimly. "Someone has introduced an artificial aging accelerator into your system's environment." Silthara's form went completely dark, a sign of extreme shock. "That is impossible. The hegemony would never. They are bound by the Galactic Biological Weapons Treaty." "The treaty was written by species that didn't understand how Death World biology works," Vasquez replied. "They probably don't even consider this a weapon in the traditional sense." She began working frantically, running simulations on her portable equipment. The weapon was elegantly designed, targeting the specific cellular structures unique to Altarian biology, while being harmless to most other species. It was also nearly undetectable unless you knew exactly what to look for. "Can you stop it?" Silthara asked desperately. "Maybe. The good news is that your people's crystalline biology is actually more resilient than the weapon designers probably expected. We can create a cellular repair catalyst that should reverse the damage. but I'll need access to your planet's mineral processing facilities. The treatment required resources that only a Death World species would think to use. Vasquez synthesized a compound using trace elements that most species considered toxic, creating a cellular repair matrix that worked by essentially forcing the Altarian cells to rebuild themselves. As the first patients began showing improvement, word of the successful treatment spread through the system, but Vasquez was already thinking beyond the immediate crisis. Dr. Silthera, I need you to help me document everything about this attack. The galaxy needs to know what happened here. But accusing the hegemony of biological warfare could start a war. Silthera protested. Not accusing them might allow them to do this to other species, Vasquez replied. Besides, they chose to test their weapon on a peaceful people, while tensions with humans were escalating. That's not a coincidence. The evidence was overwhelming once properly analyzed. The artificial pathogen was designed specifically to target Altarian biology, and the delivery method required advanced knowledge of both biological warfare and stellar engineering. Only a few species in the galaxy possess such capabilities, and the hegemony was at the top of that list. More disturbing was the strategic timing. By attacking the Altarians while human galactic relations were strained, the perpetrators had created a situation where human intervention would be seen as suspicious by some species while proving human value to others. They're testing us, Vasquez realized. This whole crisis is designed to see how we respond to biological threats against our allies. As the last of the patients recovered, Vasquez prepared her report for transmission to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. The evidence would show not only that someone had used biological weapons against a peaceful species, but that they had done so as part of a larger campaign to destabilize galactic relations. The question was whether the galaxy would believe the evidence, or whether fear of Death World species would blind them to the real threat they were facing. Dr. Silthara approached as Vasquez finished her preparations. Doctor, our people will never forget what you have done here. You saved millions of lives. I just did what anyone with the right knowledge would do, Vasquez replied. The scary part is that whoever did this knew that only a Death World species would have the biological expertise to identify and counter their weapon. What does that mean? Vasquez looked out at the recovering patients, their internal light patterns slowly returning to normal brightness. It means someone is very specifically trying to force humanity into a particular role in galactic politics. The question is whether we're being set up as saviors or as scapegoats. The implications of that realization would reshape how humanity approached its place in the galactic community and potentially determine whether the galaxy descended into the very war that everyone claimed to want to avoid. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 72 hours after Dr. Vasquez's report reached Earth Command. The evidence of biological warfare against the Altarian people had sent shockwaves through every government, but the reactions varied dramatically, depending on each species' relationship with the major powers. Ambassador Chen took her place at the human delegation table, flanked by Admiral Steele and Dr. Vasquez herself. The mood in the chamber was significantly different from their first appearance. Where before there had been cautious curiosity about humanity, now there was a mixture of fear, respect, and suspicion that hung in the air like a toxic cloud. High Counselor Zenthara called the session to order, her 6 arms moving in formal gestures that signaled the gravity of the proceedings. We have convened to address allegations of biological warfare in the Vegan system, and to discuss the implications for galactic security. Chief Science Officer Morden of the Hegemony stood immediately, his massive insectoid frame radiating indignation. The Hegemony categorically denies any involvement in the unfortunate illness that affected our Altarian friends. To suggest that we would violate sacred biological weapons treaties is deeply offensive to our honor. Dr. Vasquez rose from her seat, her movement deliberate and controlled. Honored counselors, I didn't come here to make accusations based on speculation. I came to present scientific evidence. The chamber's central display activated, showing detailed cellular analysis and radiation signature data. Vasquez walked through her findings methodically, explaining how the artificial pathogen worked and how it had been delivered to the Altarian system. The weapon was elegantly designed, she concluded, targeting cellular repair mechanisms specific to silicon-based life forms, while being completely harmless to carbon-based species. The delivery method required precise knowledge of stellar engineering and biological warfare techniques. Ambassador Veltar of the Zelani Collective adjusted his breathing apparatus nervously. Dr. Vasquez, while your analysis is thorough, couldn't this pathogen have natural origins? Perhaps some unknown cosmic phenomenon? Absolutely not, Vasquez replied firmly. The molecular structure shows clear signs of artificial engineering. Moreover, the timing and delivery method are too precise to be coincidental. Morden's mandibles clicked aggressively. Even if we accept your analysis, Dr. Vasquez, you have no proof that the hegemony was responsible. Several species possess the necessary knowledge for such an attack. True, Ambassador Chen interjected, standing beside Vasquez. But only one species had vessels in the Vegan system during the precise time frame when the weapon was deployed. The chamber erupted in agitated discussion. Representatives activated privacy shields to confer with their governments, while others demanded additional evidence. High Counselor Zenthera called for order. Even if the evidence suggests hegemony involvement, we must consider the possibility of rogue elements acting without government authorization. With respect, Counselor, Admiral Steele said, rising to his full height, that argument becomes harder to maintain when we examine the broader pattern of events. He gestured to the display, which now showed a timeline of recent incidents. First, the emergency session questioning humanity's fitness for council membership. Then the harassment of human vessels in neutral space. Now a biological weapon attack that specifically required Deathworld expertise to counter. Someone is orchestrating a campaign to force humanity into a particular role. Dr. Silthera, who had been granted special permission to address the council as a victim of the attack, spoke from her designated platform. Honored delegates, I have worked with Dr. Vasquez throughout this crisis. Without her intervention, my people would have faced extinction. Yet even as she saved millions of lives, I observed something troubling. The chamber fell silent, waiting for her next words. The weapon used against us was not designed to kill quickly, Silthera continued. It was designed to create a crisis that would require specific expertise to solve. Someone wanted to force the galaxy to depend on Deathworld knowledge. The implications of her statement sent ripples of unease through the assembly. Several delegates began reviewing their own recent interactions with human representatives. Morden stepped forward aggressively. Are you suggesting this is some elaborate human conspiracy? That they created the problem to position themselves as saviors? No, Silthera replied calmly. I'm suggesting that someone else did, knowing that only humans would have the biological expertise to help us. The question is why? Ambassador Chen saw the opening and took it. Perhaps because someone wants to force a conflict between humanity and the galactic community. Someone who benefits from division and mistrust. Preposterous, Mordoon snarled. The hegemony has maintained galactic peace for over 3 centuries. Has it? Admiral Steele asked pointedly. Or has it maintained hegemony dominance for 3 centuries? The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Several smaller species representatives began whispering among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. High Counselor Zenthara attempted to restore diplomatic decorum. Admiral Steele, such statements approach the level of formal accusations against a founding member of this council. Then let's make it formal, Chen said, her voice carrying across the chamber with unexpected authority. The human delegation formally requests a full investigation into the biological attack on the Altarian people, including examination of all vessel movements and communications during the relevant time frame. The request sent the chamber into chaos. A formal investigation would require access to military records and classified communications that most governments guarded jealously. The hegemony will not submit to such invasive scrutiny based on circumstantial evidence, Morden declared. Then perhaps the hegemony has something to hide, Dr. Vasquez observed quietly, but her words carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Ambassador Veltar stood slowly, his crystalline formations pulsing with nervous energy. The Zelani Collective supports the human request for investigation. The use of biological weapons threatens all species. Other delegates began announcing their positions. The smaller species, led by the Altarians themselves, supported the investigation. The hegemony's traditional allies remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with defending the indefensible. Morden found himself increasingly isolated. Very well, he said finally. The hegemony will cooperate with any reasonable investigation, confident that it will vindicate our honor. But as the formal procedures were established, another complication arose. Ambassador Kresh of the Andromedian Republic, a species that rarely involved itself in galactic politics, requested permission to address the assembly. "Honored delegates," Kresh began, her ethereal form shimmering with concern. "The Andromedian Republic has remained neutral in these proceedings, but we feel compelled to share information relevant to this crisis." The chamber focused on her completely, surprised by the intervention. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual communications traffic between certain hegemony military units and unknown entities outside our galaxy. The transmissions were heavily encrypted, but our analysis suggests they involved coordination of some kind of operation. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Extragalactic contact was unprecedented, and the implications were staggering. Chen felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "Ambassador Kresh, did these transmissions coincide with the initial questioning of humanity's council membership?" "They preceded it by approximately 2 weeks," Kresh confirmed. The chamber erupted once again, but this time the agitation carried a different quality. Fear was beginning to replace mere concern. Admiral Steele stepped forward. "It appears we're not dealing with internal galactic politics. Someone or something outside our galaxy is manipulating events, using existing tensions to destabilize our civilization." "But why target humanity specifically?" asked Veltar. Dr. Vasquez had been studying the data during the proceedings, and now she looked up with a grim expression. "Because we're the variable they can't control. Every other species in this chamber has been part of galactic civilization for centuries. You have established patterns, known capabilities, predictable responses. We're the unknown factor. They're testing us," Chen realized, "seeing how we respond to various pressures, measuring our capabilities, determining whether we're a threat to whatever they're planning." The implications were terrifying. If an external force was manipulating galactic politics specifically to assess humanity's capabilities, it suggested preparations for something much larger than simple political destabilization. High Counselor Zenthara called for an emergency recess, but before the delegates could disperse, Admiral Steele made one final statement. "Honored counselors, it appears we face a choice. We can continue to allow fear and suspicion to divide us while an unknown enemy manipulates us from the shadows. Or we can work together to face whatever threat is coming." He paused, looking around the chamber at species that had viewed humanity with suspicion just hours before. "The question is not whether humans are dangerous. The question is whether we're dangerous enough to protect the galaxy from whatever is coming for all of us." The Andromedian revelation had transformed everything. Within hours of Ambassador Kresh's testimony, emergency military councils convened across the galaxy. The prospect of external manipulation had forced even the most isolationist species to reconsider their positions on galactic cooperation. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force Vessel Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled in the neutral zone. Ships from 47 different species hung in space, like a metallic constellation, their various designs reflecting millennia of different evolutionary pressures and technological development. "It's incredible," whispered Lieutenant Torres, her communications officer. "I never thought I'd see hegemony and collective vessels operating in the same battle group." Mitchell nodded, though her expression remained grim. The unity was impressive, but it had been born from fear rather than trust. The joint investigation into the Altarian attack had revealed the scope of the external manipulation, and the findings were disturbing beyond anything the galaxy had previously faced. "Commander, we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Admiral Chen aboard the Unity," Torres announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Chen's sister, Admiral Janet Chen, who had been given command of the joint human forces. Behind her, the bridge of the massive Earthship bustled with activity as officers from multiple species worked together for the first time. "Sarah, are your people ready for this?" Admiral Chen asked without preamble. "As ready as anyone can be for first contact with a hostile extragalactic civilization," Mitchell replied. "What's the latest from the deep space reconnaissance?" "Not good. Our scout ships have confirmed the presence of a massive fleet at the edge of the galaxy. Preliminary estimates suggest over 10,000 vessels using technology we don't recognize." The numbers were staggering. The entire galactic defense force numbered fewer than 3,000 ships, and those were designed for dealing with internal conflicts rather than full-scale invasion. What about their capabilities? Mitchell asked. Unknown but troubling. They seem to have weapons that can affect space-time itself, and their ships show no recognizable propulsion signatures. We're dealing with technology that's centuries or possibly millennia ahead of our own. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the comm from the science station. Admiral, we've completed our analysis of the biological weapon used against the Altarians. The sophistication suggests the external force has been studying galactic species for a very long time. Admiral Chen's expression darkened. How long? Based on the genetic analysis, possibly thousands of years. They know our biology better than we know it ourselves. The implications were chilling. The galaxy had been under observation for millennia, studied and catalogued like specimens in a laboratory. The recent manipulations were just the final phase of a much larger plan. There's something else, Admiral Chen continued. The Joint Command has received a communication from the external fleet. They're requesting negotiations. Mitchell felt a chill run down her spine. Negotiations for what? They call themselves the Architects. According to their message, they've been guiding galactic development for thousands of years, steering species toward what they consider optimal evolutionary paths. They claim we've reached a point where direct intervention is necessary. Intervention? Dr. Vasquez interjected. They make it sound like they're doing us a favor. That's exactly how they're presenting it, Admiral Chen confirmed. They want to meet with representatives from each species to discuss the next phase of galactic development. Commander Mitchell reviewed the tactical displays showing the assembled fleet. Even united, the galactic forces looked pathetically small compared to what they were facing. Do we have any choice but to meet with them? She asked. The Joint Command is debating that question right now. Some species want to negotiate, hoping to find a peaceful solution. Others think we should attack while we still have the element of surprise. Surprise? Mitchell almost laughed. Admiral, they've been watching us for thousands of years. I don't think we have any surprises left. Dr. Vasquez had been analyzing the communication protocols used by the Architects. Actually, we might have one surprise. Their communications show no evidence that they understand human psychology or capabilities beyond basic biological parameters. What do you mean? Admiral Chen asked. They've been studying us as biological specimens, not as thinking beings. They know our physical capabilities, our genetic structure, our technological development, but their manipulation attempts have been clumsy from a psychological standpoint. Mitchell began to understand. They don't really comprehend how Death World psychology works. Exactly. They understand that we're physically more capable than most species, but they seem to think that makes us simply more dangerous versions of the same basic template. They don't understand that extreme environmental pressure creates fundamentally different thought processes. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent signal from the Fleet Command. Admiral Kextar of the Zilani Collective appeared on a split screen, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain. All vessels were detecting massive energy signatures from the Architect fleet. They appear to be moving toward the galactic core. Moving how fast? Admiral Chen demanded. They're not using conventional propulsion. They're somehow manipulating space itself to travel. At current rates, they'll reach the core systems in less than 72 hours. The timeline had just collapsed. Whatever negotiations the Architects wanted would have to happen immediately, or the galaxy's most populated systems would face invasion. All fleet commanders, report to the Unity for Emergency Strategy session, Admiral Chen ordered. We need to decide our response now. An hour later, the command briefing room aboard the Unity hosted the most diverse gathering in galactic history. Military leaders from dozens of species sat around a holographic display showing the Architect fleet's approach. Chief Science Officer Mordun, his earlier antagonism replaced by professional focus, presented the latest intelligence. The Architect vessels show no conventional weapon signatures, but energy readings suggest they can manipulate matter at the molecular level. In theory, they could disassemble our ships without firing a single shot. What about their defenses? Asked Commander Veltar of the Collective Forces. Unknown. Their hulls seem to phase in and out of normal space. Conventional weapons might be completely ineffective. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were preparing to face an enemy that could ignore their weapons while destroying them, with technologies that bordered on magic. Admiral Chen broke the silence. Dr. Vasquez, You said the architects don't understand human psychology. Can we use that? Possibly. They've set up this entire situation expecting us to respond in predictable ways. They manipulated galactic politics to create division, then revealed themselves expecting either submission or conventional resistance. But Admiral Steele, who had joined the military command, sensed there was more. But Deathworld species don't respond to impossible odds the way they expect. When faced with extinction, we don't calculate probabilities or seek optimal outcomes. We get stubborn. Commander Mitchell smiled grimly. You're suggesting we do something completely irrational. I'm suggesting we do something so contrary to logical tactical doctrine that it breaks their strategic models. Vasquez confirmed. Admiral Chen looked around the room at the assembled commanders. Representatives of species that had been enemies for centuries now faced a common threat that dwarfed all previous conflicts. What did you have in mind, Doctor? Dr. Vasquez activated a new display showing the galactic core region. The architects are heading for the most heavily populated systems, expecting us to defend them. Instead, we abandon the core and attack their home fleet directly. The room erupted in shocked protests. Abandoning the galactic core meant leaving billions of civilians defenseless. It's madness, declared Admiral Kextar. We would be sacrificing everything we're supposed to protect, would we? Admiral Steele asked quietly. Dr. Vasquez, explain your reasoning. The architects have been manipulating galactic civilization for thousands of years. They think they understand how we function, how we think, how we'll respond to threats. Every move they've made assumes we'll follow predictable patterns. She paused, letting the idea sink in. But humans evolved on a world where following predictable patterns meant death. When everything seems hopeless, when the logical response is surrender or defensive positions, Deathworld psychology says to attack the thing that's threatening you. Commander Mitchell was beginning to see the strategic logic. You're banking on the idea that they won't expect a suicidal frontal assault. I'm banking on the idea that what they consider suicidal, we consider Tuesday, Vasquez replied. Admiral Chen looked around the room one more time. The faces staring back at her represented species that had fought each other for millennia, now united by a threat none of them fully understood. All in favor of Dr. Vasquez's plan? One by one, hands and appendages rose around the table. Even Admiral Kextar, after a long moment of hesitation, added his support. Then it settled. Admiral Chen announced, "We're going to do something." The galactic fleet moved through hyperspace like a metal storm, abandoning the core worlds to strike directly at the architect home fleet. It was the largest military gamble in recorded history, driven by tactics that violated every principle of conventional warfare. As Commander Mitchell watched the countdown to fleet emergence, she couldn't help but marvel at how completely humanity had changed galactic strategic thinking in less than a year. 30 seconds to hyperspace exit, announced Lieutenant Torres, all systems showing green. The bridge of the Defiance hummed with tension. Around them, 3,000 vessels from 47 different species prepared to face an enemy that possessed technology bordering on the supernatural. The odds were mathematically impossible, but as Dr. Vasquez had pointed out, Deathworld species had a complicated relationship with mathematical impossibility, emerging from hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. The stars shifted as the fleet dropped back into normal space at the edge of the galaxy. Before them lay the Architect Armada, a collection of vessels that defied easy description. Some appeared to be made of crystallized space-time itself, while others shifted between dimensions like ships caught between realities. "Contact," Torres reported. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead architect vessel." The view screen flickered to life, revealing something that made several bridge officers instinctively step backward. The being that appeared was humanoid in basic structure, but clearly artificial, its form shifting between solid matter and energy patterns. "I am Primary Architect HFY," it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple dimensional origins. "Your arrival here demonstrates the primitive emotional responses we have observed in your species. You have abandoned your population centers to attack forces you cannot comprehend." Admiral Chen's voice came through the fleet communication system. "This is Admiral Chen of the Galactic Defense Force. We're here to discuss your withdrawal from our galaxy." The architect's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "Withdrawal? We have guided your development for over 4,000 years. This galaxy is our garden. and you are our cultivated species. There will be no withdrawal." Commander Mitchell exchanged glances with her tactical officer. The conversation was proceeding exactly as Dr. Vasquez had predicted. The architects expected negotiation or surrender, not the tactical insanity the galactic fleet was about to demonstrate. "Your cultivation methods need work," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "We've decided to try a different approach to galactic development." "You mistake our patience for weakness," HFY responded. "We have allowed you to develop certain technological capabilities because they serve our purposes. But your usefulness has reached its limit." The architect fleet began moving, their vessels sliding through space without visible propulsion. Energy readings spiked across the galactic fleet's sensors as weapons of unknown design powered up. "All ships, execute Operation Deathworld," Admiral Chen commanded. What happened next violated every principle of space warfare that had been developed over the past 3 millennia. Instead of forming defensive formations or attempting to match the architect fleet's maneuvers, the galactic vessels accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet at maximum burn. The architects had clearly expected conventional tactics. Their weapons, designed to disable ships at long range, struggled to target vessels that were closing distance at suicidal speeds. More importantly, their strategic models had no framework for dealing with an enemy that chose to fight at point-blank range. "They're trying to understand our tactical approach," Dr. Vasquez reported from her science station. "Their formation is breaking apart because they can't predict our movement patterns." Commander Mitchell smiled grimly. "That's because there is no pattern. We're just flying straight at them and hoping for the best." The human ships led the charge, their death world engineering proving its value as they absorbed punishment that would have destroyed vessels designed for safe space operation. Behind them, the other galactic species followed, their ships pushed beyond design specifications by crews inspired by human tactical madness. "Entering weapons range," Torres announced. "Fire everything," Mitchell ordered. The space between the fleets erupted in energy as thousands of weapons fired simultaneously. Conventional projectiles, energy beams, plasma charges, and exotic particle weapons created a light show visible from several star systems away. The architect vessels, caught off guard by the close-range assault, began taking damage. Their dimensional shifting abilities, effective against long-range weapons, offered less protection when enemy ships were close enough to fire into multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. But the galactic fleet was paying a heavy price. Ships disappeared as architect weapons unmade them at the molecular level, while others found themselves trapped in dimensional pockets that removed them from the battle entirely. "We're losing too many ships." Admiral Kextar's voice crackled through the communication system. "This tactic is costing us everything." "Not everything," Admiral Chen replied. "Look at their formation." The architect fleet was in chaos. Vessels that had moved with perfect coordination were now scattering, their strategic algorithms unable to process the concept of an enemy that would sacrifice everything for a frontal assault. "Primary Architect HFY is requesting communication," Torres reported. "Put him through," Mitchell ordered. The architect's form appeared on screen again, but now its energy pattern showed clear signs of distress. "This is madness. You are destroying both fleets for no strategic gain." "Actually, we're destroying both fleets for a very specific strategic gain," Admiral Chen replied. "We're teaching you something about Deathworld psychology. Your sacrifice is meaningless. Even if you destroy this fleet, others will come. The galaxy will be brought into compliance." Dr. Vasquez stepped into view of the communication pickup. "That's where you're wrong, HFY. You've been treating galactic civilization like a biological experiment, steering development according to your models. But you made one crucial error. And what error is that? You introduced a variable you don't understand. Deathworld species don't follow your models because we evolved under conditions that make your models irrelevant." The battle continued to rage around them as Dr. Vasquez explained the fundamental miscalculation the architects had made. "You've been guiding species toward optimal survival strategies, creating a galaxy full of rational actors who respond predictably to threats and opportunities. But Deathworld evolution doesn't optimize for survival. It optimizes for stubbornness." HFY's form flickered with confusion. "Stubbornness is not a survival trait. It is when your environment is trying to kill you every day. When rational responses mean death, irrationality becomes rational. When the smart move is surrender, stupidity becomes wisdom. Commander Mitchell watched her tactical display as more ships fell on both sides. The galactic fleet was down to less than half strength, but the architect formation was completely disrupted. "You want to know why we're willing to sacrifice everything for a frontal assault?" Mitchell interjected. "Because that's what Deathworld species do when someone threatens our family, and every species in this fleet is our family now." The communication channel crackled with interference as an architect vessel exploded nearby. When the signal cleared, HFY's form had changed, its energy patterns showing something that might have been fear. "Your tactics are irrational. You cannot win this battle." "Winning isn't the point," Admiral Chen replied. "The point is making sure you understand what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species and everyone they care about." As if to emphasize her words, another wave of galactic ships broke through the architect defensive perimeter, their crews following human tactical doctrine that prioritized aggression over survival. HFY's image flickered one final time. "This cannot be your true nature. No species could survive with such self-destructive tendencies." Dr. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time, the expression carried the full weight of humanity's evolutionary heritage. "That's the thing about Deathworlds, HFY. They don't create species that survive. They create species that refuse to die." The communication cut out as the lead architect vessel began breaking apart under concentrated fire from 6 different galactic ships. Around the battlefield, other architect vessels were beginning to retreat, their strategic computers finally recognizing that they faced an enemy whose tactical responses couldn't be predicted or countered. But the galactic fleet had paid a terrible price for their victory. Of the 3,000 ships that had entered the battle, fewer than 800 remained operational. "All ships, reform defensive positions around the human vessels," Admiral Chen ordered. "Let's see if our demonstration convinced them to reconsider their approach to galactic cultivation." As the surviving ships regrouped, Commander Mitchell reflected on what they had accomplished. They had proven that Deathworld tactics could work against superior technology, but more importantly, they had shown the galaxy what humanity brought to the interstellar community. Not just superior physical capabilities or technological innovation, but a fundamental willingness to fight impossible battles for the people they cared about. 6 months after the Battle of the Galactic Edge, the remnants of the combined fleet limped back to civilized space. What they found waiting for them was a galaxy transformed by their absence and sacrifice. The architect retreat had left a power vacuum that species across the galaxy were still learning to navigate. Commander Mitchell stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt Unity Station, watching as ships from dozens of species worked together to construct the new galactic defense network. The cooperation would have been unthinkable a year ago, but facing extinction had a way of clarifying priorities. "The final casualty reports," Admiral Chen said, joining Mitchell at the viewport. She handed over a datapad containing numbers that told the story of their victory's cost. 2,147 ships lost. Over 3 million sentient beings who would never see their homeworlds again. The price of teaching the architects about Deathworld stubbornness had been paid in blood and metal across dozens of species. "Was it worth it?" Mitchell asked, though she already knew the answer. "Look out there," Admiral Chen replied, gesturing to the construction efforts visible through the viewport. Hegemony engineers working alongside collective designers. Altarian biotechnology being integrated with human defensive systems. Species that have been enemies for millennia now sharing their most advanced technologies. The changes went deeper than simple cooperation. The shared trauma of the architect threat had forced every species to reevaluate their place in galactic civilization. More importantly, it had demonstrated that Deathworld psychology, properly applied, could protect rather than threaten. Dr. Vasquez approached them, carrying her final report on the architect technology recovered from the battlefield. "I thought you'd want to see this before I submit it to the Joint Research Committee." Mitchell reviewed the document, her eyebrows rising at the implications. They were harvesting genetic material from every species they encountered. For over 4,000 years, they have genetic samples from species that went extinct before achieving spaceflight. The scope of their research is staggering. Admiral Chen studied the data. What were they planning to do with all of this information? Create what they called optimal civilizations, Vasquez explained. They would guide species development until they reached a predetermined threshold. then replace the population with engineered beings designed for specific functions. The revelation sent chills down Mitchell's spine. We weren't fighting for our independence. We were fighting to remain ourselves. Exactly. And the only reason we succeeded is because they had no genetic template for Deathworld psychology. They could replicate our physical capabilities, but they couldn't engineer stubbornness. Ambassador Chen joined them. Her formal diplomatic attire replaced by the practical uniform she had adopted during the crisis. The Council has reached a decision about humanity's role in the new galactic order. Mitchell tensed, uncertain what to expect. Human actions during the crisis had saved galactic civilization, but they had also demonstrated capabilities that still made many species uncomfortable. We're being offered a permanent seat on the Security Council, Chen continued, with veto power over major military decisions. And the conditions? Admiral Chen asked, knowing there had to be strings attached. Full transparency regarding human military capabilities, and commitment to defend any member species that requests assistance. Mitchell considered the implications. Transparency would mean revealing the full extent of Earth's defensive capabilities, while the mutual defense commitment would make humanity the galaxy's protector of last resort. What about the other Deathworld species? She asked. The genetic surveys show there are at least 12 other species that evolved under similar conditions. Ambassador Chen smiled. That's the interesting part. The Council wants to establish a Deathworld integration program, specifically recruiting species that evolved under extreme conditions. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her data pad. They want to build a galactic civilization that can defend itself against external threats. More than that, Admiral Chen added, they want to make sure that if the architects return, or if we face some other external threat, we have the tactical unpredictability to handle it. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Lieutenant Torres appeared on the small display screen, her expression tense. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Edge monitoring stations. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Mitchell felt her stomach drop. Architect reinforcements? Unknown, ma'am. The energy signatures are different from anything we've seen before. The group rushed to the command center, where the main display showed the sensor readings from the edge of the galaxy. Dozens of massive objects were approaching, but their technological signatures were completely unfamiliar. Analysis, Admiral Chen demanded. The science officer, a young Altarian named Silchen, manipulated the display controls. The vessels appear to be using technology similar to the architects, but more advanced. Energy output is orders of magnitude higher than anything we encountered 6 months ago. Are they hostile? Mitchell asked. Unknown. They're maintaining distance from our monitoring stations and haven't made any aggressive moves. Dr. Vasquez studied the readings carefully. These aren't architect ships. The technology is related, but the design philosophy is completely different. Explain, Admiral Chen ordered. The architect vessels were built for control and manipulation. These ships are built for conversation. Before anyone could ask what she meant, the communication system activated. The being that appeared on screen was similar to the architects, but somehow more substantial. Its form stable rather than shifting. Greetings, beings of this galaxy. I am Coordinator Velthek of the Synthesis Collective. We have come in response to your educational demonstration 6 months ago. Admiral Chen stepped forward. Coordinator Velthek, if you're here to continue the architect agenda, you'll find us prepared to resist. Resistance? The being's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. Admiral Chen, we are here because your resistance impressed us greatly. The architects were a rogue faction that had lost sight of our original purpose. The revelation stunned the command center into silence. Mitchell was the first to find her voice. Original purpose? To foster the development of civilizations capable of defending themselves against threats we cannot face alone. The architects believed in control and manipulation. We believe in challenge and growth. Dr. Vasquez stepped closer to the display. You've been testing us. Not testing. Teaching. But the architects had forgotten the difference. They sought to create compliance rather than capability. Ambassador Chen joined the conversation. What kind of threats require that level of capability? Coordinator Veltek's form darkened ominously. There are older things in the universe than our civilizations, Admiral. Ancient forces that view all organized life as an aberration to be corrected. The architects' cultivation programs were meant to prepare younger civilizations for that conflict. But their methods would have weakened us, Mitchell realized. Precisely. Compliance creates vulnerability. Only civilizations that develop independent strength can survive what is coming. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had just survived one external threat, only to learn that it was preparation for something even worse. How long do we have? Admiral Chen asked, unknown. Centuries, perhaps millennia. But the preparation must begin now. And it must begin with the understanding that Death World psychology is not an aberration to be controlled, but a strength to be cultivated. Dr. Vasquez looked around the command center at the mixed crew of humans and other species working together. You want us to teach the galaxy how to be stubborn. We want you to teach the galaxy how to refuse to die when dying would be convenient for your enemies. Admiral Chen considered the magnitude of what they were being asked to do. Reshape galactic civilization according to Death World principles, preparing for a conflict that might not come for 1,000 years. What support can you provide? She asked. Knowledge, technology, access to the records of civilizations that have faced this threat before. But the strength must come from within your own people. Commander Mitchell stepped forward. And if we refuse? Coordinator Veltic's form remained stable, but its voice carried infinite sadness. Then when the ancient forces arrive, they will find a galaxy full of rational, predictable civilizations that will calculate the odds, determine resistance is futile, and surrender. But if we accept, then they will find a galaxy full of death, world-stubborn civilizations that will look at impossible odds and decide to fight anyway. The command center fell silent as everyone absorbed the choice they were being offered. Transform galactic civilization into something capable of surviving unimaginable threats, or remain as they were and face eventual extinction. Admiral Chen looked around at her crew, seeing representatives of species that had learned to work together in the face of annihilation. The unity forged in battle could become the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history. Coordinator Veltec, she said finally, when do we start? The being's form brightened with what was unmistakably approval. You already have, Admiral.